The money shot me here, of course, that is what you can have, that everyone is after my diamonds, of course, that is what you can get, and they put me in jail and take my diamonds of course, and I walk in the streets and everyone is fighting my ass, of course, I suffer electroshocks, of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have, that I'm so damn schizo, of course, that is what you can have, but okay, what can you do against that? Just survive, of course, that is what you can have, that they do what they can, of course, that is what you can see, that the jokes on me, that my diamonds are missing, of course, that is what you can have, and they do what they can, of course, that is what you can have, that they take my diamonds off, of course, and I have to work in the circus and they don't pay me, of course, that is what you can have, my family is rich and they don't pay me, of course, that is what you can have, but okay, what can you do against that? I'm working gratis in the circus, of course, and my family is rich and they don't pay me, what can you do against that? Just nothing, just give me a job, motherfucker, of course, that is what you can have, but they don't give me a job, that is what you can have, of course, that is what you can say, that what can you do against that? Just nothing, just survive, of course.
Hi, I know I'm probably gonna regret this, but whatever. I don't care anymore. I'm clearly the one who cared more, so even if you never listen to this is my form of closure.
Of course, that is what you can have, that they take my diamonds off, put me in jail and let me again in the streets with everyone fucking my ass, of course, what can you do against that? Just nothing, just survive how I can, of course, that is what you can have, but the cons come and give me my money back, of course, that is what you can have, that the cons give me my money and say, come, that's yours, and you know that's the come on, that is what you can have, and so I survive, of course, that is what you can have, that everyone is fucking my ass on the streets, of course, that is what you can have, and they take me off, put my diamonds off, they don't give me a job, my family is rich and they don't give me a job, I work gratis in the circus, of course, but with the circus I pay the money for all my wives, of course, that is what you can have, that I'm giving them money, of course, that is what you can have, that my wives are rich, motherfucker, of course I'm stealing for them, that is what you can have, of course I make more money than you in your whole life, of course, but I don't see it, what can I do against that? Just nothing, of course, you know it's so skewed, so that is what you can have, but what can I do against that? Just nothing, of course, everyone is counting my money, that is what you can have, everyone knows it's my money, everyone knows the jokes on me and that I'm counting money from the bitches who count for me, of course, that is what you can have, that the strippers count my money and I have the money and I know it's my money and we can prove that, of course, and if not, take me, that is what you can have, I give it them, of course. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what you can have, that Notre Dame is burning and you know that, of course, Notre Dame is burning, so what are you gonna do? Of course, I'm with the mid-age at 9 o'clock and Notre Dame is burning, of course, that is what you can have, that I'm with the mid-age at 9 o'clock, no one can against me, of course, I'm in love with the Cinderella, that is what you can have, that I'm in love with the Cinderella, of course, Notre Dame is burning, motherfuckers, what do you want, of course, if you take the woman from some guy, okay, do that, of course, what can I say to you, but you take women with lives, of course, and that is not funny, of course, Notre Dame is burning, motherfuckers, of course, if you take the woman from some guy, okay, do that, of course, but you take women with lives, of course, you are the worst priest from Notre Dame, motherfucker. Of course, that is what chicken half that Notre Dame is burning. Of course, I'm in love with the Cinderella. That is what chicken half. Notre Dame is burning, but I'm in love with the Cinderella. That is what chicken half that no one can against me. So come on, of course, that is what chicken half. Don't save no one, because if you save someone, you're gonna sing on and you have something of your own in your own. Of course, I'm in love with the Cinderella, motherfuckers. That is what chicken half that no one. Of course, motherfuckers, that is what chicken half that they have a degree. Of course, that is what chicken half, but okay, what can you do against that? Just nothing. Of course, that is what chicken half that I'm rich, that they make more money than you in your whole life. Of course, but they don't count it. Of course, that is what chicken half that everything goes to my wife. Of course, that is what chicken half that my family is rich and they don't wanna pay me. Okay, you think I was a bad boy, of course, but okay, what can I do against that? Just nothing. Of course, that is what chicken half that no one can against me. Of course, that is what chicken half, but okay, I'm gonna keep stealing from my wives. Of course, that is what chicken half that no one can against me. Of course, that is what chicken half that I'm schizo but not dumb. Of course, if you are with a makers, you are sinning, gone, shooting at the devil. If you come with a 219, you have to find the capital letters and let them. Of course, that is what chicken half that I'm schizo but not dumb. Motherfuckers, of course, that is what chicken half that they steal my diamonds, put me in jail and let me again in the streets with everyone fucking my ass. But okay, what can you do against that? Just go with the supers who count my money. Of course, that is what chicken half that no one can against me. Of course, that is what chicken half that Notre Dame is burning, motherfuckers. That is what chicken half. Of course, I suffer electroshocks. What can I do against that? Just nothing. That is what chicken half. Just survive with the money the stupid give to me.